The ink on my divorce papers was barely dry when Brenda called. I was standing in a grocery aisle in Crescent City, surrounded by plastic holiday cheer and $10 frozen dinners. She did not ask about my new life. She just barked that my ex was in the hospital and commanded me to bring $5,000 immediately. That familiar, demanding tone felt like a cold blade against my neck. My name is Mallory Quinn, and at 34 years old, I have learned that the most dangerous weapon in the world is not a gun or a blade, but a well-managed spreadsheet. As the operations lead at Rivermark Systems in Crescent City, Colorado, my entire existence is built on logic, flowcharts, and the cold, hard efficiency of data. I handle logistics for a multi-million-dollar tech firm, ensuring that every moving part slides into place with surgical precision. But 3 days ago, when the judge signed the final decree ending my marriage to Grant Halstead, I realized that the one operation I could not optimize was my own heart. I spent my first Saturday as a single woman in a state of clinical detachment. I moved into a small, one-bedroom apartment on the north side of the city, a space that smelled of fresh paint and echo foam. My life was reduced to a digital checklist on my phone: change the deadbolts, migrate the shared cloud passwords, revoke secondary user access on the Chase account, and purge the word family from my electronic calendar. I was 34, white, professional, and supposedly in the prime of my career, yet I felt like a ghost haunting the hallways of my own life. I had been married for 7 years, and in 48 hours, I had managed to erase nearly every physical trace of Grant from my immediate surroundings. I told myself I would never answer a call from that family again. I had blocked Grant's number the second I walked out of the courthouse. But then, as I was standing in the frozen food aisle of the local grocery store at 6 o'clock in the evening, my phone buzzed. The screen displayed a name that made my stomach tighten into a knot: Brenda Halstead, my former mother-in-law. I stared at the screen while a tinny, upbeat version of A Christmas Carol played over the store speakers. Against my better judgment, I swiped to answer. "Mallory, Mallory, is that you?" Brenda's voice came through the line, sounding fragile and breathless, like a bird trapped in a chimney. "Oh, thank God you picked up. Brenda, we talked about this," I said, my voice flat and professional, the tone I used when a shipment was delayed. "The divorce is final. You need to stop calling me. He is in the hospital. Mallory," she shrieked, her voice suddenly spiking in volume. "Grant, he had a terrible accident. It is his head. The doctors are saying it is bad. You need to get to the emergency room at St. Jude's right now. And Mallory, you have to bring the money, at least $5,000 for the deposit. They won't move him to the surgical suite without a guarantee." I stood frozen between a row of frozen peas and $10 rotisserie chickens. The cold from the freezer cases seemed to seep into my bones. Brenda didn't ask how I was doing. She didn't apologize for the months of vitriol she had spewed at me during the legal proceedings. She just barked orders, the same way she had for 7 years. "Why are you calling me for money?" "Brenda," I asked, "Grant has his own insurance. He has his own accounts. They are frozen." She sobbed, though the sound felt practiced, hollow. "The bank. They said because of the divorce filing. Oh, Mallory, please, he is your husband. He is dying." In the background, I heard the distinct, sterile chime of a hospital paging system, followed by a man's muffled, irritable growl. "Is she coming?" or what the man snapped. The line went dead before I could reply. I stood there for a full minute, the grocery store lights glaring overhead. I felt like a machine that had suddenly encountered a fatal error. Instinctively, I opened my banking app. My heart stopped. There was a pending authorization for $2,499 from a medical billing portal I didn't recognize. Someone was trying to pull money through an old, linked reimbursement account I had forgotten to delink that morning. It was a 15% chunk of my entire savings, hanging in the balance. I didn't rush to the car. Instead, I pulled up the contact information for St. Jude's Medical Center. My hands were steady as I dialed the main desk, Administration. How can I help you? A tired-sounding woman answered. Yes. I am looking for the room number for a patient admitted this evening. I said. His name is Grant Halstead. I waited, listening to the tap of keys on the other end. I am sorry, ma'am, the receptionist said after a moment. I have checked the emergency admissions and the surgical floor. We have no patient by that name in our system today. A chill that had nothing to do with the freezer section settled over me. As I pulled the phone away from my ear, a notification banner slid down from the top of the screen. It was a text from an unknown number. Is this Ms. Mallory Quinn? The message read, I work in medical billing at the Mercy Group. I think you should see this before you give them a single cent. The text from the unknown number was followed by an image file. I leaned against my grocery cart, my thumb trembling slightly as I tapped the screen to enlarge it. It was a screenshot of an internal email from Grant's old work account at his previous firm. The subject line read, Post-Divorce Liquidation and Reimbursement Strategy. My breath hitched. In the body of the email, Grant had written to an undisclosed recipient about minimizing personal liability and utilizing existing family account links for emergency medical buffers. My phone buzzed again. My name is Wade Mercer. The next message read, I am a finance coordinator for a regional clinic group. I was processing a batch of insurance claims this afternoon and saw your name listed as the primary guarantor for a high-priority admission. Something about the filing date looked off, so I did some digging. It is being coded as a family responsibility claim, specifically naming you as the one to settle the balance. The logic centers of my brain, the part of me that managed complex systems at Rivermark, began to fire at full speed. I remembered a rainy Tuesday 3 years ago when Grant had badgered me into adding my corporate backup card to our shared family emergency portal. He had flashed that boyish, deceptive smile and told me it was just a safety net, saying, just sign a few things. Mal, and it is done. It is just for peace of mind. I abandoned my cart and walked toward the exit of the supermarket, the automatic doors huffing open to let in the cold Colorado air. I pulled up my digital copy of the divorce decree. I scrolled past the legal jargon until I found the section on debt allocation. It was black and white. All joint financial obligations were severed as of 12 o'clock midnight last Tuesday. Grant had no legal right to touch my credit, let alone designate me as a guarantor for his supposed medical crisis. I sat in my car, the heater blowing cold air, and dialed Brenda back. I needed to see how deep this went. Mallory, are you at the hospital yet? Brenda's voice was sharp, the feigned fragility from 10 minutes ago replaced by an aggressive, jagged edge. I am trying to coordinate the funds. Brenda, I said, my voice steady, sounding like the compliant wife she remembered. But I am confused. Which wing of St. Jude's is he in? He is in the trauma ward, she snapped. But they might move him. The doctors at Mercy General are saying he needs a specialist immediately. Just bring the $5,000 to the billing office. Do not be difficult. Mallory. You owe this family for everything we did for you. I felt a grim satisfaction as I tapped a note on my dashboard. First, she said St. Jude's. Now, it was Mercy General. She was losing track of the script. I owe the family I asked, leaning into the provocation. You were a part of us for 7 years, she hissed. You took his best years and now you want to walk away when things get hard. If you don't pay this, if my son suffers because of your selfishness, I will make sure everyone in Crescent City knows what kind of woman you really are. The call ended with a definitive click. My phone chimed immediately after with a new message from Wade Mercer. It was a PDF labeled Treatment Estimate. I opened it and zoomed in on the signature line. My name was typed there in a clean, modern font, but the metadata showed the document had been created and modified only 2 hours ago. The estimated patient responsibility was listed as $12,400. Wade's final text for the evening was a warning. Ms. Quinn, this document was backdated. They are trying to make it look like you agreed to this before the divorce was finalized. If that pending charge on your account goes through, it will be nearly impossible to claw that money back once it hits their LLC. I gripped the steering wheel until my knuckles turned white. They weren't just asking for help, they were attempting a coordinated heist of my future. They wanted to saddle me with a fake debt so Grant and whoever he was with could start their new life on my dime. I didn't feel like crying anymore. I felt like a technician who had just found a massive, intentional bug in the system. I pulled out of the parking lot, my mind already drafting a response that had nothing to do with mercy. If Brenda and Grant wanted to play a game of high-stakes financial theater, I was going to give them a performance they would never forget. I wasn't going to hide. I was going to flip this trap until they were the ones caught in the teeth of it. I typed a quick reply to Wade. I need to meet you. Tonight. Name the place. The neon sign of the Midnight Rail Diner flickered with a rhythmic hum, casting a jaundiced yellow light over the cracked vinyl booth. It was 11:30 p.m., and the only other customers were a truck driver nursing a cup of black coffee and a tired-looking waitress wiping down the counter. Wade Mercer sat across from me, his fingers nervously tapping against a heavy ceramic mug. He looked younger than I expected, maybe late 20s, with the harried expression of someone who spent too much time looking at balance sheets and not enough time in the sun. I should not be here, Wade whispered, his eyes darting toward the darkened windows. If my supervisor finds out I accessed these private logs for someone outside the Mercy Group, it is over. I will be blacklisted from every medical administration job in the state. I reached across the table, my voice low and steady. I used the same tone I used when a software launch at Rivermark Systems was spiraling toward a 50% failure rate. I am not asking you to take a bullet for me, Wade. I do not need you to be a hero. I just need you to be a witness to the truth. He took a shaky breath and slid a manila folder across the table. It is not just about the money, Ms. Quinn. It is about the person who pushed the request through. The billing supervisor received a direct call to expedite your husband's, or ex-husband's, admission costs. The woman who made that call and provided your old insurance and banking links is named Piper Lorne. The name hit me like a physical blow. I felt the air leave my lungs. Piper Lorne. I remembered a photo Grant had shown me 6 months ago, a group shot from a corporate happy hour at his new firm. There was a woman in a sharp navy blazer, her blonde hair perfectly coiffed, smiling next to him with an air of practiced professionalism. Grant had told me she was just a senior human resources lead, a colleague who helped him navigate the transition to his new job at North Glen DataWorks. She is not just HR, I muttered to myself. She has been at our clinic 3 times in the last month, Wade added. She dresses like a high-end attorney and talks like she owns the place. She was the one who insisted your name be listed as the primary guarantor for the $12,400 estimate. I felt a cold, sharp clarity wash over me. I pulled out my tablet and opened a blank project management sheet. I began to map it out, my fingers flying across the glass. I visualized the timeline like a product life cycle. 3 months ago, Grant became suddenly cold and distant. 2 months ago, he began picking fights over nothing, pushing for a quick, no-fault divorce. 1 month ago, he moved to North Glen DataWorks. And tonight, the fake accident. Wade, I said, looking up from the screen. When exactly was this billing profile created? Wade hesitated, his voice trembling. That is the part that made me sick. The file was opened and the guarantor information was pre-filled 48 hours before he supposedly fell. They had already set the price for his injury before he even touched the ground. I felt a shiver run down my spine. It was calculated. It was a scheduled event. They hadn't just gotten lucky with an accident, they had manufactured a financial crisis to drain my accounts before the legal dust of the divorce could settle. I stepped outside into the biting Colorado wind and dialed a number I had saved in my favorites. Kendall Rowe answered on the second ring. Kendall was a divorce attorney who operated with the grace of a shark. She was known for her polite, expensive smiles and her ability to dismantle an opponent's life with a single, well-placed subpoena. Mallory, Kendall said, her voice crisp and alert even at midnight. I assume this is not a social call. I explained everything in 3 minutes: the phone call from Brenda, the 2 different hospitals, the reimbursement email, and the predated billing file involving Piper Lorne. I told her about the pending $2,499 charge on my account. There was a long silence on the other end of the line. I could hear the sound of Kendall clicking a pen. Mallory. Listen to me very carefully, Kendall said, her tone shifting into something predatory. This is no longer just a case of a bitter ex-mother-in-law hounding you for money. You are not just being harassed. You are being targeted as the primary funding source for a sophisticated fraud scheme. They aren't trying to save Grant. They are trying to harvest you. What is the next move? I asked. We stopped being defensive. Kendall replied, if they want to play doctor and patient, we are going to give them a full examination under the bright lights of a courtroom. Kendall Rowe's office was located on the 20th floor of a glass tower that overlooked the snow-dusted peaks of the Rockies. The air inside smelled of expensive stationery and cold, clinical ambition. Kendall sat behind a mahogany desk, her eyes scanning the documents Wade had provided with the speed of a high-end processor. She didn't look like a lawyer. She looked like a general preparing for a siege. Mallory. From this second forward, Grant Halstead does not exist to you as a person, Kendall said, her voice sharp and devoid of sympathy. He is a data point. He is a liability. You will not answer his calls. You will not reply to his texts. If he stands in front of your car, you keep the windows rolled up and record him on your phone. Every single piece of communication must be documented and routed through me. I nodded, my hands gripped tightly in my lap. What about Brenda? We are sending a cease and desist to both of them by 9 o'clock tomorrow morning, Kendall replied, tapping a pen against a heavy silver paperweight. We are putting them on notice regarding the unauthorized use of your financial information, but we need to see how far the rot spreads. Have you checked your credit report in the last 24 hours? I pulled out my laptop right there in her office. My heart hammered against my ribs as I logged into the monitoring service. I scrolled down to the recent inquiries section and felt the blood drain from my face. There was a hard inquiry from a company called MedLoan Solutions dated only 2 days ago. They tried to open a line of credit, I whispered, staring at the screen. A medical loan. They were trying to borrow $40,000 in my name. Kendall leaned in, her eyes narrowing. This is the opening we need. If we can prove impersonation or coerced payment, we aren't just looking at a divorce dispute anymore. We are looking at a civil suit for damages and a referral for criminal fraud. I have already spoken to Wade Mercer. He is tired of being afraid. He has agreed to provide the internal logs once I serve the clinic with a formal subpoena. No more back alley meetings for him. He will be a protected whistleblower. I leaned back, a sick realization settling in my gut. This wasn't just about a hospital bill. Brenda and Grant didn't just want $5,000 for a deposit. They wanted to saddle me with a massive $40,000 debt while the ink on our divorce was still wet. With me carrying that anchor, Grant and Piper Lorne would have their credit scores wiped clean. They were clearing the way to buy a new house, a new life, all built on the ruins of mine. Brenda wants me to be the sacrificial lamb, I said, my voice trembling with a mix of fury and exhaustion. She wants me to carry the weight so they can walk away free. Kendall watched me for a long moment. I need to know your endgame, Mallory. Do you just want them to leave you alone, or do you want to ensure they can never do this to anyone else? I thought about the way Grant had smiled at me while he was planning this. I thought about Brenda's fake sobs on the phone. I looked at the credit inquiry on my screen, a digital footprint of their greed. I want both, I said, my voice gaining a hard metallic edge. I want peace, and I want them to pay for every lie they have ever told. Good, Kendall said with a predatory smile. Then we start the counter trap. We need Brenda to hang herself with her own words. Under Kendall's direction, I opened my personal email and began to draft a message to Brenda. It felt like walking into a cage, but I knew I was the one holding the key. I kept the tone soft. playing the role of the overwhelmed, guilty ex-wife they thought I still was. Brenda. I wrote, I am so sorry about everything. I have been so stressed with the move that I wasn't thinking straight. I just want to make sure Grant is okay. Please, tell me where to send the money. Should I wire it directly to the hospital or to that account you mentioned? Please send me the final invoice and the wire instructions so I can get this sorted out today. I hit send. Now, all we had to do was wait for them to reach for the bait. I was no longer the victim. I was the architect of their downfall. I was going to let them think they were winning, right up until the moment the floor disappeared beneath them. Brenda's response hit my inbox less than 10 minutes later. The speed of her reply was a testament to her desperation. She attached a formal-looking document titled Family Care Fund and provided wire instructions for a bank account in Denver. I immediately forwarded the details to Kendall. Within half an hour, my lawyer called me back with a sharp, dry laugh. The Family Care Fund is not a charity. Mallory, Kendall said. It is an LLC registered just 20 days ago. The primary agent listed is a shell company, but the mailing address is a P.O. box that Brenda Halstead has used for years. They are not even trying to be subtle anymore. Before I could process the sheer audacity of it, my phone vibrated. It was Grant. I hesitated, then hit record on my laptop and put him on speaker. Mal? It is me, he whispered. His voice sounded thin, punctuated by shallow, ragged breaths. It hurts so much to talk. Please, just do what my mother asked. Don't make this a scene. Just send the money so I can get the surgery. He sounded like a man on the brink of death, but the underlying tone was unmistakably Grant, the same man who used to tell me how to park my car and how to season my steaks. Even in his fake agony, he was still giving orders. I want to help. Grant, I really do, I said, keeping my voice soft, letting a fake tremble creep into my words. But I need the itemized invoice from the hospital first. My bank won't authorize a $5,000 transfer to an LLC without seeing the medical necessity. There was a sudden, sharp silence on the other end. Then the mask slipped. The weakness in his voice vanished, replaced by a cold, familiar snarl. Are you kidding me? I am lying here in a hospital bed. I might never walk right again. And you want paperwork? Just send the damn money. Mallory, you have the funds. Just do it. Now. The line went dead. I stared at the phone. He wasn't a man in pain. He was a man in a hurry. He needed that $5,000 fast before the banks or the insurance companies started asking the questions I was already asking. An hour later, a message appeared from a number I didn't recognize. Mallory, this is Piper Lorne. I am speaking to you as one woman to another. You should really think about your future. A messy public dispute over medical bills would look very bad for someone making $125,000 a year as an operations lead. Rivermark Systems values their reputation, and I am sure you value yours. I felt a jolt of ice water hit my veins. $125,000. That was my exact salary, down to the last penny. It wasn't public information. It was part of my confidential financial affidavit during the divorce proceedings, a document that was supposed to be sealed. Kendall, I said, calling my lawyer immediately. They have my private files. Piper Lorne just quoted my exact salary to me. Grant must have accessed my cloud or copied my physical files from the office before he moved to North Glen. That is a massive breach, Kendall replied, her voice dropping into a dangerous register. They are using your own private data to blackmail you into paying a fraudulent debt. I am going to the judge tonight. We are getting a temporary restraining order. I want them banned from contacting you, and I want a copy of any financial data they might have harvested. By the next morning, Brenda had shifted her strategy again. She sent a final text, not to me, but to a group chat that included 3 of my former neighbors and several prominent members of the Grace Community Church. We are heartbroken. The message read, Mallory is refusing to help Grant in his hour of need. We are holding a small family meeting in the church fellowship hall tomorrow at 4 o'clock to talk through this like civilized people. Mallory, please, for the sake of the years we spent as a family, just show up and talk to us. It was a public ambush. She was using the community as a shield and a weapon, hoping that the social pressure of the church would force me to open my wallet to avoid being the villain of the neighborhood. "Are you going?" Kendall asked when I told her about the invitation. I looked at the recording of Grant's angry outburst and the screenshot of Piper's blackmail attempt. I felt a strange, calm power rising in my chest. "Oh, I am going," I said, "but I am not going there to be humiliated. I am going there to record every lie they tell. If they want a performance in front of the community, I am going to make sure the ending is something they never expected." The fellowship hall of Grace Community Church smelled of industrial floor wax and the kind of cheap, burnt coffee that only appears at funerals and neighborhood ambushes. I walked in at exactly 4 o'clock, my heels clicking against the linoleum with a steady military rhythm. I wasn't alone. Kendall was a few steps behind me, dressed in a charcoal suit that cost more than Grant's car. The room was packed. Brenda had been busy. There were the usual suspects from the Sunday morning choir, a handful of elderly neighbors who lived for local scandal, and several families I recognized from our old dinner parties. At the very back of the room, leaning against a stack of folded plastic chairs, stood a man in a nondescript navy suit. He looked like he was waiting for a bus, but his eyes were locked on the front of the room. Brenda stood at the small wooden podium, a damp tissue clutched in her hand like a white flag of surrender. She didn't wait for me to sit down. "Thank you all for coming," she began, her voice quivering with a practiced, fragile vibrato. "It is so hard to speak about family matters in public, but when a mother sees her son suffering, when she sees him abandoned by the woman who promised to love him until death, well, I just couldn't stay silent anymore. Mallory has turned her back on us. She is sitting on a fortune while he is fighting for his life in a hospital bed. I sat in the front row, my back straight, my expression a mask of bored professional interest. I remembered Kendall's voice in my ear from that morning. Let them talk. Let them paint the mural. The more colors they use, the easier it is to find the smears. Then came the entrance. The side door opened and Grant walked in. He was wearing a crisp, ironed button-down shirt and dark slacks. He had a small bandage on his forehead, placed with theatrical precision, and he moved with a slight, labored limp that seemed to switch legs every few steps. He didn't look like a man who had been in a trauma ward 48 hours ago. He looked like a man who had spent 48 minutes in front of a mirror. Piper Lorne followed him, taking a seat in the front row. She wore a tailored beige dress and a smile that didn't reach her eyes. On her left hand, a diamond ring caught the fluorescent light, a new addition that certainly wasn't there in the corporate photos I had seen. She looked at me with a terrifyingly calm confidence, the look of a woman who had already spent the money she was about to steal. "Mallory," Brenda said, turning her gaze directly toward me, the room falling into a hushed, expectant silence. "We don't want a fight. We just want my son to have his surgery. You have the $5,000. You could wire it right now, right here, to the care fund. Please, prove to everyone that you still have a heart. Prove that you are the decent woman we thought you were." A few people in the crowd nodded. I could hear a faint murmur of "just help him" from the back. The social pressure was a physical weight, a thick cloud of judgment intended to suffocate my resolve. I stood up slowly. I didn't look at the crowd. I looked straight at Brenda. "I have the funds." "Brenda," I said, my voice carrying clearly to the back of the hall. "But as an operations lead, I don't sign off on any expenditure without a verified audit. I only have one question for you, and if you answer it, we can settle this right now. Please, show everyone here the original itemized hospital invoice from this morning, and tell us Who exactly is listed as the primary guarantor for that debt? Brenda's face went from pale to a blotchy, angry red in 3 seconds. How dare you? He is bleeding internally, and you want a receipt. Have you no shame? The bill is in the system. It is categorized. You are just trying to hide behind red tape while your husband dies. It is a simple question. Brenda, I replied. The man in the navy suit at the back of the room suddenly pushed off from the wall and started walking down the center aisle. He pulled a leather wallet from his coat and flipped it open to reveal a badge and a business card. My name is Marcus Henderson, he said, his voice flat and authoritative, cutting through Brenda's hysterics. I am a field investigator for the Special Investigative Unit of United Medical Insurance. I am here because Ms. Rowe filed a formal report regarding a potential $5,000 billing discrepancy and a $40,000 unauthorized loan inquiry. The temperature in the room seemed to drop 20 degrees. The family meeting had just become a fraud scene. Grant's fake limp vanished as he stood up straighter, his eyes darting toward the exit. Piper's confident smile shattered, her hand instinctively moving to cover the new ring on her finger. Since we are all here to talk about Grant's medical needs, Mr. Henderson continued, looking directly at Brenda, perhaps you can explain why the Mercy Group has no record of a trauma admission for your son. But they do have a digital trail of a $12,000 estimate created by a third party 2 days before the alleged accident occurred. The silence that followed was the loudest thing I had ever heard. The stage was set, and for the first time in years, I wasn't the one following a script. I was the one writing the ending. Mr. Henderson adjusted his glasses, his voice dropping to a low, clinical tone that resonated through the quiet hall. Our internal review found something quite interesting. The physical injuries reported in the claim do not align with an accidental fall from a staircase. In fact, there are specific trauma patterns suggesting a self-inflicted incident, a staged event designed to hit a 90% payout threshold from a secondary high-risk policy. The room seemed to shrink. I looked at Grant. He wasn't looking at me with the eyes of a suffering ex-husband anymore. He was looking at Henderson with the panicked eyes of a cornered thief. Wade Mercer stepped forward from behind Kendall, holding a tablet. I have the metadata here. The billing file and the guarantor request for Mallory Quinn were created on Tuesday at 2:15 in the afternoon. That was 48 hours before the 911 call was ever placed. The login used to create the file belongs to Piper Lorne. A cold wave of realization washed over me, sharper than the Colorado wind. The accident was never about Grant's health. It wasn't even a clumsy attempt at a cash grab. It was a calculated, manufactured event designed to generate a fake medical debt that looked legal enough to be pushed onto me. They wanted to create a $12,000 emergency, use it to justify a $40,000 predatory loan in my name, and then disappear into their new life while I spent a decade paying for a fall that never happened. Grant didn't even try to deny the affair. He didn't care about the scandal. It is not what it looks like. Mallory, he stammered, his voice thin and cracking. We were trying to secure our future. The divorce was going to leave me with nothing. I needed a buffer, a way to bridge the gap. Piper stood up, her jaw tight, her professional veneer beginning to crack like cheap porcelain. This is nothing but an administrative misunderstanding, she said, her voice rising an octave. The dates in the system are often used as placeholders for pending admissions. It is standard medical logistics. It means nothing. Kendall Rowe stepped into the light, a small, cold smile playing on her lips. Is it also standard logistics to have a private LLC registered to a P.O. box 20 days ago, specifically to receive reimbursements from a wife's personal account, because that looks less like a placeholder and more like a money laundering funnel? Brenda let out a sound that was half scream and half sob, but the tears were gone. She pointed a shaking finger at me, her face contorted with a pure, unadulterated rage. You ungrateful, cold-hearted girl. You are destroying this family. You are ruining his life over a few $1,000s. We spent months making sure every paper was ready. We prepared the reimbursement strategy because you were going to take half of his retirement anyway. We were just taking back what was ours." The hall went dead silent. Brenda had just handed the insurance investigator the smoking gun. I looked around the room. The elderly neighbors were no longer nodding. The choir members were physically moving their chairs away from Brenda and Grant. In the suburbs of America, nothing travels faster than the smell of a scam. Grant lunged forward, reaching for my arm. "Mallory, wait. Please. Let's just go outside and talk. It was for us. Really. I did it so we wouldn't have to fight over the house. Please. Just listen to me." Kendall stepped between us, her hand raised like a shield. "Back away. Mr. Halstead. I have a temporary restraining order right here, signed by a judge and time-stamped at 3:45 this afternoon. If you take one more step toward my client, you won't be going back to your fake hospital bed. You will be going to a very real jail cell for violating a court order." Grant froze. For the first time in 7 years, I didn't feel the need to explain myself. I didn't feel the need to fix his mess or apologize for his anger. I looked at the three of them, the mother, the son, and the mistress, and for the first time, I felt the steering wheel in my hands. I wasn't just escaping, I was accelerating into a counterattack they had never even considered. By Monday morning at 9 o'clock, the fallout from the church confrontation had transformed from a local scandal into a legal avalanche. Kendall Rowe didn't just file papers, she launched a strategic strike. By 10:30 a.m., emergency motions were sitting on a judge's desk, detailing medical fraud, financial impersonation, and a blatant violation of the temporary restraining order. We weren't just asking for an explanation anymore. We were asking for blood in the form of discovery and sanctions. I sat in my office at Rivermark Systems, but my focus wasn't on our quarterly logistics. I drafted a formal cold notification to the Legal and Compliance Department at North Glen DataWorks. As an operations lead, I knew exactly which keywords would trigger a red alert. I detailed the unauthorized access to my confidential divorce filings and the specific mention of my salary by one of their senior employees, Piper Lorne. I attached the screenshot of her message. The response was nearly instantaneous. By 2 o'clock in the afternoon, my contact at North Glen confirmed that they had opened an internal investigation into a massive data breach. Piper Lorne was escorted from the building and placed on immediate administrative suspension. Her access to company servers was revoked, and her professional reputation in Crescent City began to dissolve in real time. Then came the frantic, desperate attempts at damage control. Grant tried to reach me through a burner phone, but the call was intercepted and recorded. "Mallory, you have to listen to me." Grant's voice was high-pitched, bordering on a sob. It was her. It was all my mother. Brenda, she was the one who pushed for the care fund. She was the one who called the hospital. I didn't know. I swear to God, I didn't know she was using your card. You can't let them ruin my career over my mother's mistakes. I didn't say a word. I just let the recorder run. He was already doing what cowards do best, throwing his own mother under the bus to save his skin. The reimbursement email he had sent weeks ago, however, was a digital ghost that would haunt him forever. It proved he wasn't a bystander. He was the architect. Brenda's tone changed next. The woman who had barked orders at me for 7 years suddenly sounded like a beaten animal. She left a voicemail that Kendall played for me in her office. "Mallory, please." Brenda's voice was a ragged, breathless whisper. "You have to stop this. He is my son, my only son. If he loses his job, he loses everything. I am an old woman. I was just trying to look out for him. Please, find it in your heart to have mercy. Have mercy on us." I looked at Kendall. My face felt like it was carved from granite. She didn't have mercy when she tried to steal $40,000 from my future. I said, My principle remained absolute no screaming, no late-night confrontations, and no violence. I would defeat them with the very things they lacked: the truth, documented evidence, and the cold light of the American legal system. Wade Mercer called me late that evening. He sounded relieved, because he had come forward as a whistleblower. His job was safe, and the clinic was cooperating fully with the insurance investigators, but he had found something else in the archived files. "Mallory, I did some digging into Piper's history," Wade said, his voice low. "You aren't the first person she has done this to. There was a case 3 years ago, another ex-husband, another emergency debt that was settled out of court for nearly $25,000. She has a template for this. She finds men with overbearing mothers and uses them to harvest assets from their ex-wives." The realization hit me like a physical weight. I wasn't a random victim of a bitter family. I was part of a recurring revenue stream. I was just the first woman in their path who refused to pay the bill. I spent the rest of the night at my kitchen table, my laptop glowing in the dark. I wasn't crying. I was building a master report. I organized every text, every time-stamped call, every fraudulent document, and every cent they had tried to siphon. I treated it like the most important project of my career. I titled the file Project Transparency. It was an 85-page chronological account of their greed. By the time the sun began to rise over the mountains, I had a digital noose ready for all three of them. I was no longer the girl they could manipulate with guilt. I was the one who held the ledger, and the balance was finally coming due. Just as I thought I was finally closing the door on this nightmare, my phone buzzed at 3 o'clock in the morning. It wasn't a call, but a high-priority alert from my identity theft monitoring service. Someone had just attempted to open a medical line of credit for $15,000 at a private surgical center in Cheyenne, Wyoming. I was in Colorado. The realization hit me like a bucket of ice water. This wasn't just a local scam run by a bitter mother-in-law. This was a desperate digital trail that showed Grant was trying to exploit every loophole he could find across state lines. By 7 o'clock that morning, the legal counterattack began. Kendall called to inform me that Grant had filed a cross-petition in our divorce case. He was suing me for harassment and defamation of character, claiming that my baseless accusations of fraud had caused him severe emotional distress and irreparable damage to his professional reputation at North Glen Data Works. He was seeking $100,000 in damages. It was a classic smokescreen, a desperate attempt to create a legal mess large enough to stall the insurance investigation. Brenda wasn't idle either. She had spent the last 48 hours poisoning the well. My former neighbors in the church group were buzzing with her new narrative. She posted a long, tearful video on social media, never mentioning me by name, but making it very clear who the vengeful, cold-hearted ex-wife was. I began to receive icy stares at the local coffee shop, and one of my oldest friends from the neighborhood blocked my number. For the first time, I felt the suffocating weight of social isolation. Then, the threat became physical. When I stepped out of my apartment to go to work, I found a plain manila envelope tucked under my welcome mat. Inside were 3 grainy photographs of me, one of me standing in the grocery aisle from a few days ago, and 2 of me entering my new apartment building. On the back of the last photo, a single word was written in thick, black marker. Stop. I sat in my car, my heart hammering against my ribs so hard it was difficult to breathe. I immediately called Kendall. "We are shifting to high security mode," Kendall said, her voice like a steel trap. "I am filing a police report for stalking and harassment immediately. I want the building manager to pull every second of the hallway camera footage. You are not to go anywhere alone. Mallory, this is no longer just about money." The pressure was breaking everyone. Wade Mercer called me an hour later, his voice sounding like it was being squeezed out of his throat. "Mallory, I can't do this anymore," he whispered. "My new manager at the clinic received an anonymous tip saying I was a data thief. They are questioning my ethics. If I go through with the deposition, If I testify about Piper, they will destroy me. I have to withdraw my statement. Wade, listen to me, I said, my voice sharp with a desperation I couldn't hide. They are doing this because they are terrified of you. If you pull back now, they win, and you will still be the person they blamed. The truth is the only thing that keeps you safe. Please, don't let them turn you into a victim again. There was a long silence, punctuated only by Wade's shaky, uneven breaths. I am so scared. Mallory, I know, I replied, but we are doing this together. The final blow came at noon. A man named Julian Vane, an attorney whose hourly rate likely exceeded my weekly salary, requested a meeting. He represented Piper Lorne. We met in a neutral conference room at a local bank. He didn't offer excuses or apologies. He simply pushed a document across the table. My client is prepared to offer you a settlement of $75,000, Vane said, his voice smooth and devoid of any emotion. This is a one-time offer. In exchange, you will drop all claims, withdraw your report to North Glen Data Works, and sign a comprehensive non-disclosure agreement. You walk away with a clean slate and enough money to move anywhere you want. If you refuse, well, the litigation will continue for years, and I can promise you that your reputation will not survive the process. I looked at the number. $75,000. It was enough to pay off my car, my student loans, and put a down payment on a house far away from Grant and Brenda. I felt my resolve waver. I was tired. I was scared. I just wanted to sleep without looking at the door. I looked at Kendall, expecting her to tell me to take the win, but she was looking at the NDA with a look of pure disgust. It is a lot of money. Mallory, Kendall said quietly, but you need to understand something. If you sign this, Piper and Grant walk away with their records scrubbed. They will take this exact same plan and find someone else next month. Another woman, another mother-in-law, another fake accident. If you take this money, you aren't just buying your peace. You are selling your silence to fund their next crime. I looked at the pen on the table. My hand was shaking. I thought about the photos in the envelope and the look in Brenda's eyes at the church. They think they can buy me, I whispered, my voice finally finding its edge again. They think I have a price. Do you? Kendall asked. I pushed the document back across the table toward Julian Vane. Tell your client that my silence is not for sale, but tell her to keep that $75,000. She is going to need every penny of it for her legal defense. The final meeting took place at 10 o'clock on a Tuesday morning in a neutral conference room at the City Plaza Bank. The air was thick with the scent of stale air conditioning and the sharp, metallic tang of anxiety. Piper Lorne walked in first, her shoulders back, wearing a suit that probably cost $3,000. She looked like she was arriving to accept an award, not a settlement. Brenda followed closely behind, clutching her leather purse like a shield, her eyes still darting around the room as if searching for a moral high ground that no longer existed. Grant arrived 5 minutes late, his face a pale, frozen mask. "Let's get this over with," Piper said, her voice smooth and dripping with artificial boredom as she sat down across from me. "We have the updated non-disclosure agreement. Once Mallory signs, the $75,000 will be transferred, and we can all move on from this administrative mess." Kendall Rowe didn't even look at the paper. Instead, she reached into her briefcase and pulled out a stack of folders, sliding them across the table one by one. "We aren't here to sign your silence, Piper. We are here for a formal record of evidence. I would like you to meet Mr. Henderson from United Medical Insurance and Sarah Jenkins from the legal department at North Glen Data Works." The color drained from Piper's face as the two representatives at the end of the table opened their notebooks. Brenda let out a small, sharp gasp, her hand flying to her throat. "We have the text logs," Kendall continued, her voice cold and rhythmic. "We have the recorded calls where Brenda demanded $5,000 for a trauma unit that didn't exist. We have the digital timeline showing the Medical Billing LLC was created 20 days before the supposed accident. And most importantly, we have this. Kendall slid a single sheet of paper toward the center of the table. It was an internal email retrieved by Wade Mercer, dated 2 months before our divorce was even filed. The sender was Grant Halstead. The recipient was Piper Lorne. The email was a blueprint. In it, Grant had detailed a plan to leverage existing medical authorization links to create a phantom debt that would be categorized as a pre-existing marital obligation. He had written, "If we time the accident right after the decree, she will be legally bound to cover the emergency costs before she realizes the accounts are severed. It is the only way to get the $50,000 we need for the down payment without the bank flagging the source." Grant's hands began to shake on the table. He wasn't the victim. He wasn't the man in pain. He was the architect. Piper was just the technician he had hired to build the trap. Grant, tell them it isn't true," Brenda whispered, her voice cracking with a sudden, terrifying realization. "You told me. You said she owed us. You said it was for your surgery." Grant didn't look at her. He didn't look at me. He just stared at the email, his jaw working as if he were trying to swallow a stone. It was supposed to be simple," he muttered, the words barely audible. "You had so much, Mallory. You were always the one with the career, the stability. I just wanted a start built on a crime." "Mr. Henderson interrupted. "Mr. Halstead, I am formally notifying you that our Special Investigative Unit is referring this file to the District Attorney for felony insurance fraud, and Ms. Lorne. Northglen DataWorks has authorized me to inform you that your employment is terminated effective immediately for the unauthorized use of proprietary data for personal gain." Brenda collapsed into her chair, her face a ghostly white. The phone call she had made, the one where she told me to bring the money, hadn't been a cry for help. It had been the final piece of evidence the insurance company needed to prove a coordinated conspiracy. She had tried to drown me to save her son, and in doing so, she had handed me the weights that would sink him. I stood up slowly, looking down at the man I had once loved and the woman who had tried to destroy my life for a down payment. "I don't owe you salvation, Grant," I said, my voice quiet and steady, cutting through his pleas. "I don't owe you a second chance, and I certainly don't owe you my silence. I only owe myself the truth." I walked out of that conference room and didn't look back. The Colorado sun was bright and cold against my skin as I stepped onto the sidewalk. For the first time in years, the air didn't feel heavy. The debt was gone. The lies were documented. I looked down at my phone and saw a single notification, a new beginnings checklist I had started that morning. The road ahead wasn't a ruin. It was a clean, open path, and for the first time in my life, I was the only one with the keys to the car. Thank you for listening to this story. I would love to hear from you. Where are you listening from today? Please leave a comment below so we can connect and share our thoughts on Mallory's journey. If you enjoyed this story of justice, please subscribe to the Lily Revenge Stories channel, like the video, and support us by hitting the hype button so more people can hear this story.